Okay, did you get that open okay? Okay, let's go ahead and go, once you get Animate open, go ahead and hit Create New. We're going to create a new, of course, a new project. Now here there's not a lot to change. This is pretty easy to set up. We're just going to do full HD, so 1920 by 1080, so that'll work great on anything that we view it on. But over here, make sure the frame rate is at 24. Yours might default, did yours default to 30? It might have defaulted to 30. Change that down to 24. 30 is what you would film in when you do like your phones default to 30. TV shows are usually 30. Movies are all done in 24 frames per second, so it gives you kind of a more of a movie feel to it. And in animation, it's easier just to keep it at that rate rather than create more frames and stuff too. And then ActionScript 3.0, that should default to that too. Then go ahead and hit Create. This is going to get us into our setup. Now yours is going to look a little bit different. We're going to get yours to look like mine. Over on the left-hand side, though, you'll see some tools. Some of those tools will look familiar from all the Adobe stuff we do. Along the top, you have your traditional file commands and everything. Over here on the right, though, do you have like some icons and some like, I don't remember what's on there. I want to say Santa Claus, but is Santa Claus on there for some reason? There's some over there. We're going to change that up a little bit. If you go clear to the top right, you'll see, you know, like where you close and you minimize and do all those. There's three little icons. There's a play button. Next to the play button, if you mouse over it, it says Workspaces. Look for that Workspaces, and where you're under Basic right now, click on Essentials. And these are just mostly different layouts that you can get into, but the Essentials is going to give us what we need as far as this right-hand side. It's going to give us some properties with the tools that we're using, with the frame that we're on, just some different things that we can do. Good with that? Okay, now down here on the very bottom, this is our timeline. Now our timeline is going to be similar to what we did in Premiere, only it's going to work in frames. Premiere actually worked in frames too, only we were dealing with like, 4 and 5 minutes at a time or an hour at a time rather than just seconds at a time. So down here on the bottom, you'll see I have, this says 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, goes up to 50. So if I have 50 frames and I'm editing at 24, that's going to be like 2 seconds worth of shots right there. Now, depending on what and it actually tells me 2 seconds above it. If you can't see that many frames, there's a little slider up here. It's an open circle. You can slide that back and forth, and that'll shrink and increase your frames. This up here is called your stage, and the stage is where you're going to build everything. Now the stage is a little bit different. Let me shrink that out a little bit, and the Control- will shrink that out for you. The stage reminds me kind of like Illustrator, and this is very similar to Illustrator too. It's a vector graphics, and so you're going to have points and anchors and curves, and you can do pen tool, all that kind of stuff. You can do that in Animate. But you can also go outside of the stage. So as you're creating, and you do movement, and we'll do that with the next project, you can actually create stuff off the stage and then have it move across the stage when you want it to. Okay, so don't feel like you're constrained to just editing on that white portion of your screen. Okay. So down here on layers, we're going to start with a new layer. So let's do a background layer. So on layer 1, just go ahead and double click on the words layer 1. And we're going to name that background. You end up with a lot of layers. And so you want to kind of keep them organized. So that one's called background. So just double click on the words, type in background. Now we're going to paint our background. So let's go over and grab the brush. And we're going to grab the second brush down. There's two different brushes. There's the fluid brush tool. Don't mess with the fluid brush tool yet. We'll do that down the road. Do the one under that. We're going to do just the classic brush tool. Okay. When you click on it, it's going to open up your tool tab. On the right-hand side, you've got tool, object, frame, and dock. We're going to do a tool. There's different ways that you can paint with it, but you'll see there's a fill color and an opacity. That's really what we're going to play with today. And then you've got the size. And your brackets still work, but your brackets don't show. It shows the size over here, but it doesn't. I wish it showed the size on your screen. It doesn't show the size on your screen. I wish it would get bigger and smaller there. So you got to kind of watch the number over here. So let's start with the ground first. So go ahead and click the fill. Pick a color that you would like to make the ground. We just got to have something that our ball can bounce off of. Okay. And then I'm just going to draw just a line across. I'm going to hold my shift key down actually to make it straight, and then just fill in the rest of the ground. So that's where my ball is going to bounce. Okay. Then I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to build or make a tree. So go ahead and draw a tree over on the wherever you'd like, really. Okay, let's make a new layer. Now the new layer button's a little bit different than all the Adobe stuff. It's just the little plus sign. You'll see that it's interesting, the icons on these are a little more simple than what they are in the other Adobe products. This used to actually be called Adobe Flash. You guys heard of Flash before, and like the Flash games and that kind of stuff. They used to be made in this program. Flash is now gone. It's not supported anymore. And so Flash kind of got converted into animation and an animation product, or into Animate. And so it's not, Flash isn't really dead, it's just a different name. But they've really tuned this into an animation product. And so, but it's also competing with, I don't know what some of the other ones are. There's some other ones out there that are like, that you can do animation like on the iPad and some different things too. So, yeah, anyway, so let's make a new layer. It's just a plus sign. It's not the normal piece of paper with the corner turned up. So go ahead and click on the plus sign. That's going to get us a new layer. This time let's call this one the guide. So just double click on it, call it guide. And this is where we're going to go where I drew on the board. We're going to draw the path that our ball is going to take. So I'm just going to grab my pen tool or my brush tool again. I'm going to get it pretty small. If you already have the brush tool, you'll see the frame and stuff. If it doesn't go back to your tool, just click on tool, and that brings back the properties for your brush. I'm just going to make it maybe black and make it a little small. Now here's where you're just going to start, and you can start off the screen again, but you're just going to draw a path that your ball is going to bounce. If you wanted to, you could actually go through and do some guides on there too, if you wanted to kind of figure out where the ball is going to go. It gets a little cluttered, so depending on what I'm doing, I don't always do that. So like what I would do is I could take and do like figure out how many I want across the top, and then I could work my way down, have them start to spread out a little bit. So you can kind of tell where you want those to go. Have them on the bottom and have another one coming up. But it gets a little cluttery. So I'll leave that up to you if you want to do that or not. Sometimes if you know the path, you can kind of eyeball that when you start to edit that. Okay. Now lastly, we're going to make one. Did you do okay with that? Are we okay with the path? Keep moving. So lastly, we're going to make one more layer. Okay, so go ahead and hit one more layer. And this one's going to be called animation. And you could name these whatever you wanted to. As you're editing yours, you can name it. This is the ball because the ball isn't moving, or this is the bird because the bird's moving, whatever it happens to be. I'm just going to put animation for now. Now here's where it's going to get a little crazy, okay? So hold on tight. Now if you notice, look at the difference in these frames. So I've got on frame 1 right there, we've got 3 different ones. You'll see kind of a little bit lighter gray with a dark black circle. That's what they call a keyframe. Whenever you see the circle, it's considered a keyframe. When it's black, that means it's filled in. There's something on the paper there. If it's not, like I just did the animation one, you'll see I have a new blank keyframe there. It's a little darker gray, but it has a hollow circle in it. That means that's called a blank keyframe, because the keyframe, there's nothing in it. That's a blank piece of paper that you're going to draw on. That's going to come into play down the road. So you got to kind of keep that in mind. There's a difference between those two. Okay, so make sure you're on the animation layer on that first frame, and we're going to draw our first ball. Now, if you wanted to, you could just get your brush and you can make it like great big, and then just stamp your ball. That gets a little bit more challenging though when you start to stretch your ball out. Because when you stretch, let me show you what happens. And you're welcome to do this, but again, just know that it's just a little bit more. So if I increase my size, let me get like a red ball. And if I click up here to do my ball, I could actually free form that. So if I click on it, and you guys have seen this before, you can do the free transform tool. I could stretch that out, and then I have to rotate it. That's the only difference between it. So you'd have to rotate it. So that would create the ball for you, just so that the rotations on the, because you want your ball as it's coming down to be stretched out along that path. You don't really want it to be like this straight down. It'd be kind of weird. So I like to paint mine instead, but I'll let you decide what you want to do. So I just grab my paintbrush tool, and I just paint over the top of that. So I'm just going to make my ball like that. Okay. So just do one ball as it's coming in the screen. Don't do another one yet. Now we're editing it's edited on 2s, but we're actually doing 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, right? So we're going to click on frame 3. So make sure you're on your animation layer on frame 3. Now we need to pull out a blank piece of paper. Now to do that, you're going to hit F7. F7 does it. You could do a right click and do insert blank keyframe, but an F7 is just quicker and easier to do. So I'm going to hit F7, and notice it gave me a blank keyframe. But what else did it do? Everything else is gone, right? But look at your timeline down here, and you can see why. We're on frame 3, and there's nothing underneath frame 3. So we need to stretch out our background and our guide. Now don't hit F7 on that, because that's going to give us a bunch of keyframes. So let's do the guide first. Click on guide. So guide frame 1. This time hit F5. All F5 does is stretch it out. And I can actually hold that. Let's hold that and stretch that to let's do like 40 for now. And then do the same for background. Click on background frame 1 and stretch it out just by using F5. So that didn't give us a blank piece of paper at all. That just stretched out our first frame. It's like it duplicated that over the course of all those different frames. The only time you really want a keyframe is if you're making something move, which is what we're doing with our ball. Let's say we wanted the tree to fall over. We might stretch that out. We might stretch our background out till here, so it's the same tree, and then halfway through, we put a keyframe in there, and our tree starts to fall. Does that make sense how that works? So you really don't need that until you don't need a keyframe until something's moving. All right, let's go back to animation frame 3. And then let's color in the second ball now. So we're going to go up and color in the second ball. And then what frame? Frame 5. So we're going to go to animation frame 5 and hit what? F7. And then we're going to do the third ball. Now wouldn't it be nice if you could see the other ones where the others are at? Has anybody ever heard of what we're going to do? Yeah, we're going to do onion skinning. There's what they call onion skinning. You know how onions have a thin skin and you can kind of see through them? We can do that with this. Animators, you'll see they'll put stacks of paper and they'll be on a light board so they can kind of see through them, or they'll flip them up and back. But onion skinning, there's 2 circles that looks like a solar eclipse or something on there. So click on that. That actually turns on your onion skinning. And you'll see when you turn that on, there's where you've got the frame count, 10, 15, 20, 25, there's brackets where the onion skinning. That's how far back your onion skinning is going. And you can stretch that out if you want to. So I could grab the orange line and stretch that forward, and I could see all of everything. So you can see there's the other balls as they're coming in. So you can kind of get a reference of how big it is and where it's at. Just go ahead. Okay. So I've done 1, 3, and I have 5, and then I'm going to do 7 is going to be the next one. So I'm going to do 7, hit F7, and then draw the next ball. And then I'm going to go to 9, hit F7, draw the next ball, Now when you start going down the hill, what are you going to do to the size of your ball? You're going to start stretching that out, right? Remember to keep the volume the same. So I'm on 11, so I'm going to start to stretch that out just a little bit. Then I'm going to go to 13, F7. You kind of get in the flow of it. 15, F7. Ooh, that's a big one. Take just a second. Let's at least go over the first. Well, you'll get cruising. You'll get quite a ways done. Okay, now there's a play button up here that you can play what you've created. If you hit the play button, you'll see I gotta start over. You'll see your ball bounce. Now there's also a loop button. So just two from the left, there's a loop button. So if I turn on the loop button, and then I gotta stretch it out what I want it to loop, it'll actually play just over and over again my bouncing ball. Okay. And you can turn your guide off. If you just mouse over by your guide, you'll see there's an eyeball, so you can just turn your guide off just like you would a layer. Just mouse over the word guide, and you'll see it pops up. There's a lock and an eyeball. And then when I push play, I just got one. You can start to see what your animation looks like. And you can start playing. You'll start to get a feel for like how close to put the ball together between each sheet or between each frame. The volume of it, you can go back and do some adjustments. You can add more, like we're editing on 2s. If you need to slow it down, you could add another frame. You could add another frame inside of that to slow it down a little bit. Or to speed it up, if you want to go faster, you could delete some of those frames in there. If you right-click on it, it just gives you the chance to remove the frames from that. Did you get your ball to bounce? Okay, let me tell you what you're going to do for your project, and I'll let you loose. So I don't want you spending too much time on this. This was just to get you the layers and the movement and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to create an animation using a ball again. You can select whatever kind of ball you want to use. So you could do a cannonball, a bowling ball, a baseball. I don't really care. You're going to create a background first. So you put your background on there. And that can be whatever it is. Let's say you're doing a baseball. So you could do a baseball field out there. Okay, it doesn't really matter what it is. Make sure you do a guide layer, but I don't want to see your guide layer when it's done. So that, because you actually turn it into a movie and then we'll watch the movies. But create a guide so that you know where you want the ball to bounce. So I want your ball to bounce off of things. It can bounce across the screen if you want to, but have it bounce across the screen and then maybe bounce off the tree or something. Tell some kind of a little story with it. And then you got to create a second animation. So not just the ball bouncing. So you got to have something else happening inside of that. So that would be like the tree. Let's say the ball hits the tree and then the tree falls over. Okay, it can be something like that. Or I've had students that'll take a cannon and they shoot a cannonball out of a cannon. Well, the cannon moves as the ball's coming out of it. Now, it's really not that hard if you think of just doing like another animation. So if I wanted the tree to stand there, I just would have my animation, but I wouldn't start keyframing that. I wouldn't start creating it movement until halfway down. Or if I have the cannon shoot, I'd have the cannon maybe have the fuse light and then the cannon like explode. That would be this part. My ball wouldn't start till down farther. Okay, everything's not going to start right on. So you got to kind of start to think about how those animations are moving. And it's the same, if you want a bird to fly and you got just a simple bird, you just think about where the wings are at and with the bird. I mean, it really doesn't, you can animate anything that you want to. But I just want 2 animations happening. And then I got to look at the instructions. I want to say it's 5 seconds long. I can't remember if it's 5 seconds long, but you can go as long as you want. But I think it's 5 seconds long. So background and 2 animations are what I'm looking for on this one. Okay? Questions?